Good afternoon, everyone. I am a Ohlone Mission Indian and Chicana. My tribe is the Costañón Rumsen Carmel tribe, Rodriguez clan. My grandmother is Virginia Antonio Rodriguez Lopez, and my mother is Rita Rodriguez Lopez. We are the direct descendants of Maria Josefa Mojica de la Rosa, who was born into the California mission system before settling in Duarte, California on Tongva land. Our ancestral homelands are the Monterey Bay area, Berkeley, up through San Francisco area. And again, my name is Sylvia Gonzalez Youngblood. I am honored today to be delivering the virtual land acknowledgement, but I do also want to kind of signify the importance of the land acknowledgement and why we do land acknowledgements here in California and remembering the Tongva ancestors here in San Gabriel Valley. It's to combat the continued genocide and erasure of Native American peoples here in California and across the US and the continent. So through loss of land, language, history, and culture. So today I'll be giving a land acknowledgement that was created by Julia Bogney, a Tongva elder who has since passed on to the spirit world. It was created in collaboration with Julia and Indigenous Circles of Wellness. And the land acknowledgement is that we acknowledge and thank our Tongva, Tatavian, and Chumash relation on whose ancestral lands we reside, gather, and pray. We honor all of the ancestors and their descendants here today and the contributions of all our relatives, past, present, and future. So thank you today, and thank you for allowing me to give this land acknowledgement.
And thank you so much, Sylvia Gonzalez Youngblood. It is right that we open this webinar before even I welcome with an acknowledgement that we are on occupied Indigenous lands. Thank you so very much for joining us. My name is Margaret Prescott, and I'm the founder of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders. And I want to welcome all of you to Black Women's Lives Count, reclaiming our sisters everywhere. We are still continuing to get the word out about the murdered women in South Los Angeles. And also we are planning a permanent memorial for the victims, and we are encouraging your support. Just a few ground rules and to let you know what our program will be like. First of all, if there are any members of the media who are present, or filmmakers, book writers, etc., would you please identify yourselves in the chat? Please put your name, your media outlet, and an email address that we could follow up with you. We also want to acknowledge any family members who have lost loved ones in these horrific murders. We want to acknowledge their presence. We're asking the audience to put your questions throughout the program in the Q&A, not in the chat. Please find the Q&A. If you go to the bottom of your screen, I think it's a little bit to the right, you will see that, and you can pose your questions there. We are going to have a Q&A session after our speakers. To give you a sense of the program, you're going to be hearing some clips. We have two amazing keynote speakers, Dr. Tarian Williamson, a researcher on the serial murders of Black women across the country, Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly. Many of you know of him, of course, with UCLA, very well-known author and historian. They will both get proper introductions before they speak. You also will hear a brief bit about the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders and about the Rose South LA Memorial Project. It's a heavy topic, we know, and you could see in the background of trying to show some of the faces of the victims. But before I go to introduce the clips, we heard the land acknowledgement from the Indigenous people, and I would also like to use this time to call in the ancestors, call in those African ancestors who made the way, the path for all of us to be here today. And we request their presence and their help in making this webinar a success, and for what we are trying to do to lift up these victims, for us to remain on the right path. I also want to lift up the spirits of the victims who died in such a brutal and horrific way. You know, I feel their presence. I've been doing this since I founded the coalition in the mid 1980s, and I often feel their presence. And I think that they likely are with us today. So we want to lift them up and acknowledge them. And we also want to, as I said, acknowledge any family members. We know that the grief just doesn't go away. So because the topic is heavy, we do have a lot of information for you. We are also going to pause at some point in the program for a very brief meditative session so that you could think a bit about what you have heard, and then we will continue with our program. So without any further ado, I would now like to introduce two clips. And these clips are from the film, Nick Broomfield's film, Tales of the Grim Sleeper. It was shortlisted for an Academy Award. It has been on HBO, and you're going to hear the first clip of Nana Jumphy, who is a member of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders. And then you will hear from one of the survivors. And Nana and the survivor will set the tone for the rest of the program. Let's go to those clips now.
You've allowed Black women to walk around here when someone is hunting them, not knowing that they're being hunted. Imagine if they would have treated victim number 3 as if she was a student over at UCLA with blonde hair and blue eyes. How many other people might still be living? But the lack of concern allowed for this hunting ground to just be free and open for this person. You know, and that is for me the real tragedy. You know, the real tragedy is just the lack of concern allowed so many more people to be murdered.
Do you think also that people were afraid to come forward and say something?
That's very, very plausible. I mean, the relationship with the police and the community is such that no one wants to be the person who's giving the police information. You just don't. I tell my own son, you know, he's 16 years old. If something terrible happens and your mother's not home, here are the numbers of people to call. But whatever you do, do not call 911. No, literally, for what? So you can come answer the door, they can blow you away. Don't call 911. You know, or while you're trying to tell them what happened to you, they're trying to find out, you know, they use drugs every once in a while. You know, are you a part of this gang? They're trying to fill out their little field identification card when you're trying to explain to them that someone has done something, you know? You cannot just, as a Black person, walk into an LAPD station or LASD station and just say, I have something to report, and start describing something and think that you're going to, you know, be treated with dignity, treated with kindness, treated with concern, and be able to leave feeling good, you know, warm, confident. Yes, I've done something. It is a 99% chance that this is going to be an unpleasant situation for you.
We're now queuing up the second clip, which is a survivor of one of the serial killers. There were actually a series of them in South Los Angeles.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I was out there. That doesn't mean I'm nothing. It doesn't mean I'm nothing. Like I'm a piece of trash. I was trapped. I was trapped. I was trapped. That's not what I wanted. That's not the life I wanted.
What I'm trying to explain to you and say to you is that Just because they have Lonnie doesn't mean this is over with. There's another motherfucker out there just as sick as he is. You know what I mean?
Our sisters, they may be gone, but they're not forgotten. It's very hard to see those faces, some mother's daughter, some father's child, to know that they're gone, but we are carrying on with their memory and uplifting them today. I would now like to welcome Janet Dandridge. I have so much love for this young sister. A few years ago, she came to one of our meetings in South Los Angeles, and Janet said, I want to volunteer. I want to work on this. She is a fantastic artist. And the flyer that many of you have seen, you see a figure in a dress. That figure is Janet. And that dress is a cloth that she had especially made with the photos of the victims. And she has continued over the years to be with us. She's now a young mom of a one-year-old boy. And she has been key with helping to pull this webinar together. I'd like to welcome Janet Dandridge, and she will tell you a little bit briefly about the Black Coalition as well as the Memorial Project. Janet, thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I don't even know where I would be actually in understanding and knowing what's going on in South Los Angeles if it hasn't been or wasn't for your work. So I am in deep gratitude to you. So thank you so much, Margaret. I appreciate that lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. I am going to share some information, as Margaret said, about the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders and about Rose, South LA, Reclaiming Our Sisters Everywhere, Los Angeles, the actual permanent memorial that you are here to support. So bear with me while I read some information. Following the police announcement that 11 women were victims of a serial killer in South Los Angeles in the mid-1980s, Margaret Prescott founded the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, BC, a coalition formed to bring public awareness to the murders, to press the police and city officials to prioritize the murders, to ensure that the media did not trivialize and malign the victims, to bring attention to the neglect of South Los Angeles and similar communities, and to highlight the general lack of resources in the impacted communities. Since its founding, the coalition has held press conferences, vigils, and other protests, and supports families of victims they have worked with. The Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders continues to press for justice, accountability, just victims' compensation for families, and for the lives of all Black women to count. For the lives of all Black women to count. Rose, Reclaiming Our Sisters Everywhere. To date, it is estimated that over 200 women and girls are victims of serial murders or have mysteriously disappeared. The South Los Angeles community has been traumatized by the violent loss of so many precious lives over such a protracted period. This loss and trauma must be acknowledged. We refuse to accept the silence and indifference that often follows these murders. We say the names of these Black women and girls who are victims of serial murderers in South Los Angeles and etch them in stone. Each victim is a mother's child, a father's daughter, a sibling's sister, a friend. The victims deserve a permanent memorial that reclaims their dignity, shows community care, and provides their family members and the community a dignified space for reflection and healing. The victims are gone, but they will never be forgotten. There is no official commemoration of these devastating events. A monument is a public statement of worth. It restores dignity to the victims, validates their humanity, and the humanity of their surviving families alike. It declares undeniably that these Black lives mattered. Rose, South Los Angeles is that public statement, reclaiming our sisters everywhere.
Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you for all of your work. I want to acknowledge that the mother of Barbara Ware, we lost Barbara in 1987. Diana Ware is with us. Diana, we know that Barbara is with us as we go through this, and we walk this path together. And we want to thank you for your strength and everything that you have brought to this struggle. Laverne, Janisha's mom, if she's not on now, she was substitute teaching today. She will be joining us very shortly as well. Janisha Peters, we lost her in 2007. I would now like to remind all of you that this is also a fundraiser. So there is a link, a donate link in the chat. If you have not yet donated to the Rose South LA Memorial Project, we invite you to do that now. That link will remain throughout the program. And I would now like to welcome Dr. Chandra Ford, again, another person without whom none of this would happen. Chandra, maybe you could just share a little bit about yourself and how you came to this struggle briefly.
Thank you, Margaret. And first of all, I just want to thank you for your dedication. It's difficult to do this work, and you have been at it for a long time, often by yourself or pulling in people as they were willing and able along the way. And we wouldn't be here today were it not for that continued struggle. So thank you.
I know this is all pretty heavy stuff that we're dealing with. And Janet, if you would come on, I think now would be a very, very good time for us to for just a few minutes, to pause and meditate, think about
Yes.
what we just heard, Janet.
Yes. We have Ronika LaJoy here, a wellness practitioner. Ronika, if you can come on for us, please, who is going to guide us in a meditation, just giving us time to reflect and breathe in healing. Ronika is my sister, and I'm going to go ahead and just sit here with you all in that meditation. So Ronika, please.
Greetings, everyone. And it is indeed a pleasure to be here to honor the lives of these women who was taken from us, from their families, from their communities, in the way that they were taken. So right now, what we want to do, we want to connect to what we feel inside in regards to these women and their lives. So I'm going to ask everyone to just get very comfortable. Take a moment, close your eyes, and take a deep breath in. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale again. And exhale. And I'm going to ask you to continue to inhale and exhale, feeling the energy flowing through you and out of you. As you continue to inhale and exhale, think about the images that you have seen today. Think about the names of the women that you have heard today. Think about the families that you have heard from. Think about the community members. And as you think about everything, what do you feel? What do you feel inside of your body? What emotions come up? Name those emotions within you, the same way that the names of our sisters whose lives were taken were named today. You may feel anger, maybe hurt, maybe a little despair. You may feel justice. You may even feel revenge. Whatever it is you feel, acknowledge it and name it. And as you continue to inhale and exhale, connecting with your emotions, what part of your body do you feel? What part of your body is responding to these emotions? Pinpoint that area inside of you. Now breathe into it. Inhale and exhale. And as you feel these areas of your body that are responding to these emotions, begin to breathe in light and healing, love and compassion, empathy. But what you feel in your body at this moment is your connection to these women and their experiences. Being part of the living, part of our work is to help our ancestors to move on. And these sisters are now our ancestors. So we help them on the other side. As we breathe in love, compassion, justice, appreciation, celebration of their lives, and honor for what they came to this earth to do and what they represented. Take a moment to feel the energy that's been generated inside of you. Take a moment to allow this energy to fill every part of your being, for we are all one. And now send this love, this light, this energy of healing to the spirits of these women. Just send it out into the universe. They'll receive it. They're receiving everything that's being generated from all of the speakers here today. and then send that energy to their loved ones. Touch their hearts. Send it from your heart to theirs. And as we leave this space and continue on learning more about this history in our community, carry within you the energy of these women. See them healed and renewed in the spirit form that they're in now. And carry love in your heart and compassion for their family members. Take a deep breath in. Release. Last breath in, inhale. And exhale. Move forward knowing that you are a vessel of healing. You are a vessel of change. Ashe.
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 Ashe. Thank you so much, Renika Adachi. We really needed that. We appreciate you joining us. And Janet, thank you for hooking this up. I would now like to remind you that any questions that you have, please put them in the chat. If you're going to make a donation, the link is in the chat. We want to know who you are, who's donating. So please put your name, put an email address, so at least we could send a thank you out to you. And again, look in the chat for that link to donate. Just so you know what's coming up, Dr. Kelly is going to be joining us. And I would like now to introduce the man who will welcome Dr. Kelly, Michael Massenberg, who is part of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders. You could look him up. He's an amazing artist, and you could see his work. We were really fortunate in our work and in our core to have a few artists to join us and be part of us. And I think, Michael, I can't remember, but I think it was at a screening of Nick Broomfield's film, Tales of the Grim Sleeper, in the Pan-African Film Festival, that you came up and you said, I live in the neighborhood, I'm impacted by this, and I want to help. And you have been with us ever since. Michael Massenberg, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to work with all of you, because this has been a long journey, and I'm the newest one of the newest ones involved, but whatever I can do, I'm here. So thank you very much. I'm going to introduce you to one of our distinguished speakers today. Dr. Robin D. G. Kelly is a distinguished professor and a Gary B. Nash Endowed Chair of U.S. History at UCLA. He received his education at Bachelor's of Arts degrees from Cal State University, Long Beach. He received his master's and doctorate at UCLA. Early in his academic career, right around 2009, 2010, Dr. Kelly served as a chair for the Howard Young Hollingsworth Professor of American History at Oxford University. He was one of the first African-Americans to do so. Along with his teachings, residencies, and fellowship, in 2014, he was also awarded a Distinguished Guggenheim Fellowship. Dr. Kelly is also a prolific essayist, has been published articles in scholarly journals and anthologies and with the popular press, including The Village Voice, Boston Review, and New York Times. Dr. Kelly has published numerous books focused on African-American history, culture, and race relations. He is the author of the definitive biography of the Homeless Monk, which received the PEN Open Book Award. His other important books include race rebels, culture, politics, and the Black working class. And also your mama's dysfunctional fighting culture or wars in urban America. Among his current projects for 2023, Dr. Kelly's next published book will be Black Bodies Swinging, an American Postmortem, which examines the political economy of premature death and the struggles to preserve Black life. It is now I present you with Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly.
Thank you, Michael. The only thing that matters for me is that I know Margaret. All the other stuff is just useless information. But I really appreciate that. So let me just jump in and first with thank yous. Both thank you for that really kind and generous introduction. Thank you, Chandra Ford and the Center for the Study of Racism, Social Justice, and Health for hosting this important event and all the work that you do. Special thanks to my friend and colleague, Terrion Williamson, who actually taught me more than I taught. So I'm like a student of hers, and you should read her book, Scandalize Her Name, and read her essay, In Souls, Why Did They Die, which is very, very important. And especially thank Margaret Prescott for all the critical work you do, and I'm going to thank you throughout this talk. And I just want to remind people that this is a fundraiser. And so you've got to go to that link as soon as you can and donate some money. I put a challenge out. I donated $1,000. Okay, so if you have that kind of money, you should spend it. If you have more than that, you should spend more because this is a very, very important project. And as Terrion said, there are just basically no or very few memorials to all the Black women murdered all throughout the country. So we're here to memorialize the Black women murdered here in LA and all Black women, cisgender, queer, non-binary, trans, who were victims of femicide. What happened here happened all across the country, as you learn from Terrion's brilliant presentation in that very moving film. And it's also been happening, for generations. But we're here to commemorate, at least I'm here, to really focus on the struggle. Specifically, the courageous organizing work of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, founded by Margaret Prescott. And I know that she doesn't like to toot her own horn, but this is what I'm going to do. We only know about these women because of Margaret, who founded the Black Coalition in 1985. Basically, her and family members, she was out there pretty much by herself with the support of the victims of family members, and over time recruited a handful of really dedicated organizers, like the incredible attorney, Nana Jumpy. Certainly you've heard from Janet Dandridge and Michael Massenberg and others. They fought for decades, mobilizing against the routine killing of Black women who were treated by police and society as a whole as disposable. The LAPD inferred their disposability by using the moniker that they use for most Black people, that is NHI, no humans involved in these cases. The Black Coalition was relentless. Margaret became a thorn in the side of the LAPD and a public relations nightmare for the city of LA. She exposed the police for inaction and for suppressing evidence. They forced the LAPD to eventually form a task force and the LA City Council to authorize a reward of $35,000 for capture and conviction of the killers. Now, the Black Coalition was not the first or only organization in the country calling attention to serial murders of Black women, as we heard from Terrion, but I want to really spend the next few minutes highlighting what was unique about the Black Coalition, what's unique about their analysis and the analysis that Margaret brought to this work. For one thing, the problem they faced, they understood went way beyond a single deranged individual. She and the Black Coalition understood that state policies and state violence were behind the deaths of these women by making them vulnerable to femicide, to premature death. Margaret knew that poverty, precarity, gendered violence, the erosion of the social safety net, whatever's left of it, and the fact that so many Black families lose members to the criminal justice system left so many Black women and girls vulnerable to things like sex trafficking, physical and sexual abuse, and homelessness. Black girls make up more than 40% of the US domestic trafficking victims, and yet police routinely classify missing Black girls as runaways rather than as abductees. They're not, they're being abducted, presuming that Black victims of sex trafficking are willing participants, which then makes them subject to prosecution and thus unworthy of protection. In other words, Margaret Prescott understood what many of us still do not, and that is the deaths of Deborah Jackson, Henrietta Wright, Barbara Ware, Bernita Sparks, and all the others mentioned were as political as the killing of Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, and others. We don't see the politics all the time because of the ways in which the victims are devalued. Margaret often tells the story of the police official who asks, why are you so concerned about all this? He's only killing hookers. And we've heard that before. You see it in the movies. You see it on, special victims units, right? We've heard that refrain many times. The cops characterize the victims as drug addicts, as runaways, and this compels a lot of the activists and the victims' families oftentimes. It puts them in a defensive position, and they feel compelled to defend the reputations of the victims, their innocence, to prove that they deserve justice. But here's the thing. So Margaret and the Black Coalition refused to play along from the very beginning. The truth is, most of the women whose lives Margaret Prescott were interacting with at the time and fought for were in fact sex workers and addicts. But rather than deny it, she insisted that their livelihood in the racialized and gendered web of oppression maintained by the sex industry, the drug economy, the police, and the criminal justice system made them more vulnerable to femicide, but no less valuable, no less valuable. As the co-founder of International Black Women for Wages for Housework and a central figure in the organization of sex workers and welfare mothers, Margaret grasped the gendered economic basis for poor women's vulnerability and defended all reproductive labor as valuable work. That is to say, work deserving dignity, work deserving protection, and work deserving fair compensation, including, of course, sex work. So long before she founded the Black Coalition, she was fighting against the very conditions that rendered all poor and working class Black women subject to premature death. So to understand her revolutionary perspective, we've got to go back a bit. And most of you know her story, going back to her native Barbados, being an early civil rights activist in New York City. In the 70s, she taught adult literacy in the SEEK program, Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge, at Queens College, part of City University of New York. And the program was really unique in that it was designed to help low-income Black and Latinx students succeed, many of whom were, of course, welfare mothers on public assistance. The SEEK program became a hotbed of feminist organizing. It had the teachers included people like June Jordan, Adrienne Rich, Audre Lorde, and then two women who would become really important comrades, Ndaye, a revolutionary organizer and intellectual who would return to her native Guyana and help found the Working People's Alliance. She recently passed away a couple of years ago. And Wilmot Brown, a former Black Panther from Newark, who ended up in England. The three of them were drawn to the writings of Selma James, founder of Wages for Housework movement, And having worked with welfare mothers and poor Black women, reading Selma James reinforced her critique of liberal feminism and helped them see how demanding money from the state rather than competing with men for a career was critical for advancing women's liberation. And so therefore you see Margaret, organizing sex workers, first as part of Coyote, and then as a founder of the U.S. Prostitutes Collective. They argued that the criminalization of sex workers kept them in a state of precarity and dependency because sex workers had no right to legal protection. So the idea was abolish the laws criminalizing them. This was especially the case for Black women who faced a higher chance of arrests and violence than white sex workers and were subject to a state authority that would declare them unfit mothers and place their children into foster care. So even before the whole divest, invest movement was all the rage among abolitionists, the Prostitutes Collective was arguing that state funds used to police sex work and basically divide families could actually be used for housing, childcare, social services, and to create safe houses for those who are runaway minors. So my point is, Margaret Prescott never hid or evaded the fact that the victims, many of whom were in fact compelled into sex work. And in her view, and that of the Black community at large, how these women earned a living was actually irrelevant because many of the victims were mothers. The Black Coalition did some things that we don't always talk about, like they set up mutual aid networks to provide food, clothing, and financial assistance to the families of the victims. They provided counseling for the children who were left behind, and really thinking about what were the consequences of these murders for the families and for the whole community. And still, while they're doing all this work, the body count kept rising. And at every press conference, you could see, Margaret Prescott, out there challenging Police Chief Daryl Gates to explain why the LAPD withheld information from the public for nearly 2 years, why they didn't make an arrest, why they had a different response to some of the other serial murders that affected white women, like the Hillside Strangler, the Night Stalker, all that stuff. And yet she knew all along, the Black Coalition knew all along, that the police were never capable of stopping the murders and delivering justice. They consistently pointed out that the LAPD's slow and meager response had to do with the class, the occupation, and the color of the victims. And they even, as a last resort, tried to turn to Mayor Tom Bradley to get a federal investigation. But even Tom Bradley was like, no, Gates can handle it. Margaret understood that the problem was never a matter of manpower. And this is a really important point I want to drive home as I come to a conclusion here. It was never a matter of manpower because law enforcement in LA County and prison construction throughout the state experienced spectacular growth during this very same period in 1980s and 90s, fueled by the war on drugs and the state's strategy of prison expansion as one means of jumpstarting California's stalled economy. So between 1984 and 1990, the LAPD force, and I'm not even talking about the county sheriff, because they were also involved, but the LAPD force grew from 6,900 officers to 8,400 officers. And part of the windfall that the police enjoyed had to do with the fact that they got all these extra resources due to the 1984 Olympic Games. Again, this is all simultaneous with the murders of these women. And of course, what did the LAPD do? They deployed those resources to escalate its war on Black and brown youth, ostensibly the war on gangs, which was sold to the public as a war on drugs, even though the targeted gangs only accounted for about a quarter of the drug trade. It didn't matter because by the mid-1980s, LA and the nation more broadly witnessed a dramatic increase in crack cocaine use. These women the women we're talking about, the women we're memorializing, were the casualties of war. The war on drugs heightened police harassment of sex workers in South Los Angeles, especially as crack cocaine reshaped the economy and the sex economy. Many, if not most, of the victims were trading sex for crack or working the streets to earn money to secure drugs. And again, I'm not saying all, because again, like as Terrian pointed out, the scope is enormous in terms of children and elders being victims of violence and femicide. But in terms of this core, it's important to put it in the context of the war on drugs. Their relative isolation as poor Black women, often having to deal with the drug economy, expose them to violence from clients, from pimps, from dealers, from cops, from predators, and nearly all male. They all controlled every aspect of the underground economy. And women were, of course, denied and still are denied an equal share of the revenues. So it keeps them dependent on men and subject to exposure, since women and girls are on the front lines of where the sexual and drug economies meet. These women were harassed, are harassed, shaken down, and especially vulnerable to what? To rape and murder. So this very web of oppression is precisely what the abolition of all laws pertaining to sex work promised to end. So the bottom line here is that there is a relationship between the struggle for autonomy of sex workers and state violence, the expansion of the police power, and the abolition of those kinds of laws, and the abolition of the carceral state. So meanwhile, in the shadow of police power, Black women continue to be killed. Margaret Prescott went on to be the principal coordinator of the Global Women's Strike in 2000, which mobilized under the slogan, "Invest in caring, not killing." The strike clearly reflected an older tradition of women's peace movements, and the call to invest in caring, not killing is really an unambiguous appeal to anti-militarism. But that's not all. We can read this slogan as an abolitionist demand to put forward by the combatants of this domestic war, right? In many ways, this memorial is an anti-war memorial. I hope we could think about it this way. It recognizes and mourns the loss of so many Black women, and at the same time reminds us that the war is hardly over, and the police cannot win this war. On the contrary, policing and the criminal justice system perpetuate this war. The Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders is the model of the kind of anti-war movement that we need, and our survival depends on it. So put your money behind this, and please support building this memorial and support all the work of the Black Coalition. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Kelly, Robin Kelly, thank you so very much. So well put. Casualties of War, an anti-war memorial. Thank you, Robin. We hadn't really thought of it in that way, but when you uttered those words, it made perfect sense. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for the $1,000 donation and everything that you do, Dr. Robin Kelly, including supporting those student workers that are on strike in the UC system. Thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
And Robin, you mentioned my name quite a bit. None of us can do this alone. I'm glad you mentioned the strike, and Selma James and Nina Lopez over in London, Rachel West, who's on this call right now with US Prostitutes Collective. They were some early supporters of this work of the Black Coalition. And I ran across a statement from Us Bros from the early days. And I hope we're able to put a link in the chat, because they have an event coming up this coming Saturday called Hookers in the House of the Lord, where they'll be talking about women who were sex workers who took over churches in France and in London, England as well. And Robin, I happened to be there with my little baby Chanda. I think you know my daughter as well at the time of that occupation. So please find out about that event as well. We're going to have some time for question and answer, right? We do have a call to action. I do also want to lift up Bobby Hodges Betts, who's one of the early members of the Black Coalition fighting back serial murders in the mid-1980s. She's having some health challenges, so we want to hold her in our hearts and lift her up. Laverne Butler Scriven and Alma Stent, there were so many who stood with me, and the women in Los Angeles who were part of the global women's strike. Sydney Ross Risden, who is actually on this call counting money, the late Ruth Tedesco and others. We wouldn't have been able to do it without our sisters standing with us. But what I'd like to do before we go into the Q&A, Robin, and to underscore some of what you have said, is we have another clip from Nick Broomfield's film. If you haven't seen it, Tales of the Grim Sleeper. We want to thank Nick. When he first came around talking about doing a film, I didn't want to know. I didn't even want to talk with him, but he was persistent. And in the end, he did a job that was one of 5 for I think the Independent Film Awards and shortlisted for an Academy Award. Let us go to a piece of that film right now that underscores some of the action that we took.
25 years after the killing began, Lonnie Franklin was finally arrested in July 2010.
One man preyed on the innocent, stole the lives of women living in some of our toughest neighborhoods. Today, I'm proud to announce that this terror has finally come to an end. Thanks to the recent use of DNA evidence, and even more importantly, 2 decades of exhaustive detective work, 25 years of reviewing and re-examining evidence.
So what was your reaction to that press conference?
Oh, the congratulatory one, Jerry Brown was there. This was before he was elected governor. I thought it was quite a show. And that's one of the reasons I took the mic.
Can I talk to Detective? Can I just add to that? I'm Margaret Prescott, founder of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders. For us, it's been since 1985. I have a file here of documents going back to 1985 that were mimeographed. It's a very emotional time for us. Detective Kilcone, I'm not going to get up here and attack you. I know that we've been critical, and
I think they were a bit shocked. I don't think the police chief had anybody take the mic from him before.
All righty, indeed, they were pretty shocked and looked pretty annoyed with me at the time. But before, before we start the Q&A, I have to do something that some of you have heard me do on Sojourner Truth, the show that I host on Pacifica Radio so many times. I'll have a sip of water here. This is, as Robin Kelly reminded us, a fundraiser. And I just want to share a few more names with you, if that's okay. I just want to share some names of some of the victims between 1983 and 1985. I've got a list here that is way too long to read today. Lolitha Prevot, 22 years old. Patricia Coleman, 28. Gail Marie Roussel, 40 years old. Sheila Burton, 30. Frankie Bell, 30. Patricia Dennis, 25. Shelley Walters Hall, 31. Lillian Stovall, 34. Patsy Webb, 22. Kathy Gustafson, 31. Deborah Jackson, 29. Gail Ficklin, 24. Myrtle Collier, 37. Gidget Castro, 28. Nisi Gail McElrath, 19 years old. Elizabeth Ann Landcroft. Then the names of the victims killed by the man that was dubbed the Grim Sleeper. We now know that that name was actually a false name because he continued to kill. He never stopped killing. I mentioned Deborah Jackson's name in 1985, Henrietta Wright, Bonita Sparks, Barbara Ware, Alicia Alexander, Janisha Peters, Lucretia Jefferson, Princess Bartholomew. Princess was only 15 years old. Valerie McCorvey, Mary Lowe, and there were others. And we also want to lift up Mary Lowe's family. I think some of them are with us today. Now, a memorial is going to cost some money. We're all volunteers. None of us, for all of these years since the coalition was founded, has ever been on paid staff. We're not an NGO. We are community volunteers, right? And doing this work. So for us to be able to bring a memorial to fruition, we're going to need your help. We're going to need your support. So I want to highlight that we have 3 people actually who thus far as I know, who have donated $1,000. That's Robin Kelly. That is Jonathan Kidd. That's Sonia Odompton. Those are 3 people, $1,000. What I'm going to do now is to ask anyone who can make a tax-deductible donation towards this memorial, and we're careful with every penny. Okay, we're not frivolous people. This is movement money and money for these victims. So if there's anyone else here who could donate or pledge your support at the $1,000 level, we want you to do that right now. And please put your name and your email in the chat. So I want to thank those of you, one of whom, by the way, is my daughter, Chanda, who is just a little girl. I want to thank her because Chanda was just a little thing when her mother was running around doing this work and also being threatened by the police and perhaps even by one of the killers. This is what my daughter went through with me. So Chanda, appreciate your support and your generosity here. So please let me know, Sydney, who is doing the count, if there are others who came in at the $1,000 level, just send me a chat or something and let me know so that I could announce their names. I also want to give a shout out to Susan Burton, the founder of A New Way of Life. Susan was out on the street during the crack epidemic. She's an award-winning campaigner. She's not able to be with us today. She's traveling, she's on the road, but Susan has done amazing work. And Susan said to me, Margaret, I could have been one of those victims because I was out there caught up in the crack epidemic and being out on the street. And Susan, thank you for your $500 donation. So I'm asking any of you now who could donate $100 level to please do so. All righty. Are you hearing me now? I heard that my mic was muted for a moment. Right. So we have 3. You can hear me. Okay. So Susan Burton, thank you, donating at the $500 level. And there are a couple of other people also at the $500 level. Martin Osendorp, we want to thank you for all of your personal support for me and my work and for donating $500. Dr. Bita Amani from Drew Medical Center at the $500 level. So any others at the $500 level, right now, actually, if we count the pledges that came in since we got publicity out for this event and during this event, we're a little over $7,000. Let's aim for $10,000. Let's see if we could get $10,000 by the end of this event. If you haven't donated anything at all, please, just the link is in the chat. You can make a checkout to Women in Dialogue in Sydney. If you would put the address of where people could send that check, that would really be good. The Black Women Radicals who came in at the $150 level. Bonita Lawrence out of Canada came in at the $100 level. And I should say is that we are tracking very carefully, and our hearts go out to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and their families. We are in solidarity with them and some of the family members of the Black Coalition and the family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women. A few March 8th, International Women's Day, they came together on the same stage. The Association of Black Physicians, we want to thank you for your donation. Sydney Ross Risden, who came in at the $100 level. The Women's March Foundation of Los Angeles, Emmy, we want to thank you, came in at the $200 level. And the actor and actress Mimi Kennedy, you know, Mimi is always with us with the grassroots. Mimi, we so appreciate you. We really appreciate your pledge for this memorial. We do want to have time for Q&A. So I think you get the point. The point is that we need your money. We need it now. It's tax deductible and you can donate at any level. Let's see some love pledges. Those of you, Allie Marsh, who donated at the $25 level. Pat Albright out of Philadelphia, who donated at the $35 level. If you could donate $5, $10, $20, $25, please do that now. And what I'm going to do is add up the amount and let you know by the end of this program if we manage to reach our $10,000 goal for this. And Sydney has put in the chat where you can send your checks to. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up here with this money pitch. Thank you, all of you who have pledged, all of you who have donated. And if I've left anyone's name out right now, it's because I just don't have the information in front of me. Oh, Yasleen Coley, thank you so very much for your donation of $100. So on that note, Robin and Terrian, I had hoped that we would have some time for some interaction between the two of you. We had hoped for about 10 minutes, but I think we are running a little short on time because we promised people we will be done by 1/2 this hour. But I think we can take a few minutes, perhaps 5 minutes or so before we open it up to have about 10 minutes or so of Q&A for any interaction that you have with each other. You're welcome to do that now. If not, we'll go straight to the Q&A. Thank you. Terry-Ann or Robin, anything that you all, Robin has to run in 3 minutes. We hear you, Robin. Okay, thank you. Thank you for everything you've said. So maybe what we can do now is to, let me see if I'm following the program here. Yes, let's go straight to the Q&A. And I know there were some questions that were posed in the chat. And Alicia Vargas, if we could spotlight Alicia. Alicia, are there any questions now that Terrian and others of us could answer? And if there are any questions for Robin Kelly, since he had to go, we will get those questions to him. And if you put your email in the chat, we'll be sure to get any responses that we get from him. Alicia, are there any questions for us?
No questions. There was a comment by Bonita Lawrence. What we have found in Canada with Indigenous women who are targeted as Black women in the US, the similarities are stunning with the massive missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada, is that while sex workers and addicts are the most vulnerable, it's also that anybody who is Indigenous is targeted, including students, especially those who must come to the city because there are no schools in the north, with a rash of killings of young men as well as women in northern cities like Thunder Bay. But the structures of what has happened to the Black community in the US and the war on Black women and youth and the sheer numbers in one section of LA is stunning and horrible. Thank you so much for all this work. This memorial is so important, and thanks so much for bringing the global women's strike with us.
All righty. Thank you, Alicia Vargas. We want to thank Alicia. She is the assistant producer of Sojourner Truth and volunteering her time to be with us now. And Terry Ann, I'm wondering if you have any comments or thoughts given what you heard from Dr. Kelly's presentation. You know, we've been up against law enforcement quite a bit here in Los Angeles. I mean, the idea that they were referring to victims as no humans involved. We know that some of the victims were, in fact, sex workers, but not all of them were. And we were pretty outraged by the media and everyone else having, you know, everybody that kind of stereotype. But we also weren't going to shy away from the fact that if you wound up on the street for whatever reason, we know poverty is a big reason for that's not a death sentence as well. But Terry Ann, any further comments?
Sure. And I also, just to the comment about Indigenous women in Canada, Indigenous women and girls across North America, and also thinking about in relationship to them as well, femicides of Mexican women at the border, for instance, like that this work is absolutely in solidarity with that work. And I think, you know, part of what Indigenous women across the United States, I mean, this work is absolutely in solidarity with that work. And I've learned a lot from the kinds of actions and sort of collective work that folks in those spaces have also been doing. So I wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for the comment. And in terms of so much of what Robin said, as usual, is so helpful. But in particular, in my own comments, I talked about part of my own impulse to wanting to do the work was to try to understand the conditions of possibility. And Robin said the thing, right? Like to talk about the way that the undercurrent, that what we're talking about, what you, Margaret, have been so invested in doing, what Combahee River was so invested in doing, what so many people in community who think about these things have been thinking about, is that that the idea is not about going after individual killers, right? One of the things that I sometimes say is that I don't believe in monsters. And what I mean by that is there have been times when I've been called upon, you know, when people need someone to say a thing about X killer, typically someone who does work other than the kind of work whose killings have been of people who are not Black women or girls. And that the idea is to sort of focus on what the killer did, who the killer was, and how these kinds of monsters can live in society. My first response is always that I don't believe in monsters, not because I don't believe that people can do very monstrous things, but that because the conditions of possibility for those monstrous things to occur are the very kinds of political state violence that Robin was talking about, and that the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders and so many other organizations have been invested in speaking to us about. And so often that is not the thing that law enforcement wants to talk about. This is exactly why, as Robin also said, that this work has to be deeply bound up with thinking about the sort of abolition of the sort of penal colony, right, of penal institutions, right, because they don't have the ability to keep us safe in the ways that we need to be safe. So that's just sort of a brief sort of response to some of what Robin.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Terry Ann. And Alicia, I think I saw at least one other question and a comment in the chat. Are you able to share that one with us?
Yes, Angela Birdsong would like to know, are there any current areas nationally or locally of missing Black women that we are not aware of, that are not getting enough press or law enforcement?
Well, Terry Ann, I could start with that because that's true right here in Los Angeles. We still don't have a full count, and we need a full count of those victims. We know that there are at least 200 Black women dead or missing and presumed dead and presumed victims of serial killers, okay? So, but in meeting with, with some of the detectives, they said that the the keeping of the was so bad. I mean, there were all the Jane Does and the fact that they were seen as throwaway women, that proper records weren't kept. But during the period of time that we're talking about, there could be as many as 500 women, not all of them victims of serial murders, okay, but a similar population of women found in similar circumstances. So, you know, those families of missing people, very recently, I was contacted by a family whose loved one was killed in a motel in downtown Los Angeles 25 years ago, and they never got any justice. They want to know what has happened to their family members. We also know that family members didn't get the level of victims' compensation that they should have gotten, because there were regulations in the state of California that said if you're a victim of a violent crime and you either had some kind of record, you were arrested for whatever before, or you were a sex worker, you were not eligible for victims' compensation. And it took Rachel and folks from U.S. Prostitutes Collective, along with a whole coalition across the state, to push to get those regulations changed in California. But we're really not sure that those regulations are actually being implemented. So we want to dig into to see what level of victims' compensation those families did not get and should get, because a lot of them have left children behind, their family members that are still mourning their loved ones who were traumatized by this. But Terianne, do you know of other cases that are not solved right now, in answering that question?
Well, the first thing is that often we don't know. Often, as when I talked a little bit about Combahee, it can take a very long time for cases to be connected. And sometimes, so they get talked about as sort of these individual murders. And so they don't get talked about and they don't get connected together. And so that's why it takes so long, or the number of deaths have to stack up in such a way that it becomes acknowledged as a serial murder case. So that's just thinking specifically about serial murder. I live in Chicago currently, and there have been a rash of murders. There's any number of unsolved murders of women that have happened in Chicago. And it is really hard to get a bead on what exactly is happening. Are we talking about serial murder in the traditional sense, which is one person who is stalking particular kinds of victims? Are there multiple killers who are stalking certain kinds of victims? It's just not entirely clear, but there are folks here in the community who are also doing work around. So the annual We Walk for Her march, for instance, that happens in Chicago on the South Side where I am, where people are advocating around those murders, which is to say, whether or not we know who is doing the killing, we know that Black women are being disappeared and are turning up dead. And there's work that's being mobilized around that here in Chicago and in other places. And the one other thing I'll mention is I know of a case in Jacksonville, Florida, a series of 3 murders, I think were all trans women. And I don't know that case has yet been solved. Last I knew anything of that case, it had not yet been solved. And that was in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm not sure how much attention that case has received outside of the Jacksonville area either.
Right, there have been a slew of murders of trans women, of Black trans women in particular, but several of whom were sex workers as well. But Alicia, I'm looking at the clock and we do have to do a call to action, do some thank yous, etc. But Alicia, anything else you have for us right now from the chat or the Q&A?
Karen Thompson shares her sister's name was Earline Bagler, killed on the 25th of October, 1997. The police has a name and DNA of the suspect, but decided not to file a case arrest.
Wow. Well, Karen, I know she was somebody in touch with us recently. This is still going on. So we're certainly going to try to do what we can to support the efforts of your family. All righty. And I think now, Janet, I'm going to be calling on you again as we have reached to this stage in the agenda.
All right.
And we are going to do a call to action because we need help with this work.
Yes.
I've been carrying the water for a long time, people. I'm not as young as I used to be now. We need help. I'm so glad Janet and Chandra and Nana and Michael are around, but we need a lot more like the Janets to be able to join us. So Janet, you want to kick off our call to action?
Yes, please. Just to reiterate what Margaret is saying, we need you. We need volunteers. First and foremost, please remember to donate to the Rose South Los Angeles Fund. This is how the memorial will happen. Make your networks aware of the murdered and missing women and girls in South Los Angeles. The coalition is available to speak to organizations, houses of worship, schools, universities, any and all networks you have access to. We need to make these networks aware, these people, we need to make the public aware of the murdered and missing women and girls. Also, as I mentioned, we need volunteers. The Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders needs volunteers. This is ongoing work, as we've all heard, and it takes human power. So we need volunteers to write articles, make consistent posts to share to various media outlets, write letters to publication editors to encourage them to inform their audiences of the missing and murdered women and girls. And we absolutely need a dedicated volunteer to update and maintain our online presence. For the Rose Memorial, we need a project coordinator. We're looking for someone who can help bring the memorial to fruition, someone to manage all things Rose South Los Angeles. So this is art, right? This is a place of healing, utilizing art to heal, to help us heal. So we need a project coordinator who has background in public artworks and getting them, making them come into fruition. So if you know anyone, or if you are that person who can be that project coordinator, please let us know. And I believe that in the chat, we'll have the information to contact us, but I'll say it, info@rosesouthlA.org.
Thank you so much for that, Janet. And we certainly do need the help. And you know what? If you've got 2 hours a month, there's a way in which you can help us. Isn't that true, Janet? Even if you have an hour a month, there's something that you can do to help us. You can invite us to come speak to your university, to your class, to your religious organization. You can help to get the work. I see Chandra has put in the chat a tweet that you can get out. So we really are depending on you. Please, we need your name and your email address in the chat if you would like to help us with this work. You don't have to be in Los Angeles. You could be any part of the country, or indeed any part of the world. You saw Benita in Canada, Selma and Nina and them are over in London, so people from Philadelphia on the line here from Chicago. So there's a lot certainly that you can do. And also there is the work for justice. There's the work of the memorial, but we have other things on our agenda as well as the Black Coalition. I mentioned the issue of compensation. If you could help with any research, that would be very, very welcome. These families really deserve some justice. If you're interested in mentoring any of the young people who perhaps lost their moms in this, this would also be a big help. So we want to, just say that there are things that y'all could probably help us with that we haven't even thought about yet. Right? So just be in touch. Put your name and your email in the chat and know that we need you, that there's something that each and every one of us can do. Could you imagine any other community? Some of you have heard me make this statement before. One young blonde goes missing in Aruba and the whole nation knows about it. You've got at least 200 Black women and girls in South Los Angeles, and most people in Los Angeles don't even know about it, much less the nation, much less the world. This is an outrage, and it is a continuation of the devaluation of our lives, the devaluation of the lives of Black women from the slave days, where we were just seen as breeders, to produce more slaves. This NHI label that they're putting on us, no humans involved. This is a historic thing that that we are carrying and is continuing today, but it has got to end. So we want accountability. What happened with law enforcement? Why did these murders go on for as long as they did? So you can help us with some of that political work as well. So check out our website. I think our website and our contact information hopefully is up in the chat. Is that right, Janet and
Yes, it
Chandra and
is.
others
Mhm.
who are doing that? And we are now 3 minutes out before we have to end the program. And Chandra is waiting in the wings. We've got a lot of people to thank, but I've got an update. We have $1,000 donation from our very own Chandra. Okay, just saw a note. Don't need to acknowledge publicly. Well, sorry, I did. I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, you know
And,
what? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we now have a grand total of $8,560. That is just
Yes.
fantastic. Thank you so very much. And
Yes.
it doesn't have to stop there. So anybody who wants to, go in and get in on this tax deduction, the end of the year is coming up. All righty. So keep that in mind as well.
And
But
you have the link right there in the chat that you can go to, even if it's afterwards and you want to pass it on to a friend or someone else that you know who can donate. Please share the link. Please share that information.
right. And Alicia, you're saying, how can we access the recording? We'll get back to you on that one, because this has been recorded, and we know that some of the Pacifica stations, they do want to carry this in New York and as well as in Washington, DC. But Dr. Chandra Ford, I think you're next with our thank yous.
And the first thank you goes to you, Margaret. Thank you so much for pulling us together and holding us to task to do this work. We are very fortunate to have many co-sponsors, and I want to pull the slide up that shows that at least lists our co-sponsors. So our co-sponsors include A New Way of Life, Alexandria House, Los Angeles, the Association of Black Women Physicians, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Black Women Radicals, Center for the Study of Racism, Social Justice, and Health at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, Dr. Cosette Lyons-Jones, Elliott Gold, Global Women's Strike, Healthy African American Families, Los Angeles Community Action Network, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, New African Womanist Caucus, Nick Broomfield, the filmmaker, Papillion Art, Susan Burton, the Charles R. Drew University Black Maternal Health Center of Excellence, U.S. Prostitutes Collective, Women of Color Global Women's Strike. I also want to thank the tech team, Nell, Sydney, I want to thank you for coordinating in terms of all of the chat and donation material and information, not just here, but over the long haul. Alicia Vargas, thank you so much for volunteering your time here. I want to thank my center coordinator, E. Manel David. I also want to acknowledge other members of the coalition, Janet, for so much that you did here in preparing tonight's event. And of course, Michael. I want to thank Nick Broomfield for the film. I also want to thank, importantly, the family members for allowing us to share your story and continuing to walk, even when it's very difficult and painful to walk in this journey and in this pain in many ways. And we're hoping that we can get to a place of reclaiming something of the dignity that your loved ones deserve. And with that, I'm actually going to announce that we'll transition now to the morning song for victims and their loved ones.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Chandra, to say the language in this song is Dida from out of the Ivory Coast. It's called Lubu, and this is mourning for all of those that we have lost. Wow. I think that's it. That's it for us. Chandra, we just want to wish everyone well and thank you for joining us on this COVID-free event. And we have made a recording. We'll find out how to make it available where it can be posted. So Chandra, you've just been terrific. Thank you. Any last quick send off, Chandra?
We are all connected, and may we continue to be connected and see ourselves as connected in the struggle. Thank you.
Thank you again, all of you, for joining us, and let's continue this work together. Thank you. Be well and safe. Remember to put your name and email in the chat. Bye-bye.